Trying to know from the get-go exactly what you're going to build whenever you're working in a feature or just an application in general is extremely hard. And we always try to say, don't over-engineer features, go with the simplest approach, which I think is okay. But when you're dealing with complex features or complex applications, building actual products, that sometimes is very complicated. You often don't really know what you're going to need fully to build a feature. And sometimes further down the road, you might realize that you chose the wrong abstraction or that you're missing something that would allow you to build a key feature correctly. And more often than not, we can't afford to go back and redo what we built. So we end up with hacks and some weird things in our code base that we say we're going to fix later, and we always end up not fixing it. So on this video, I'm going to show a simple, I would say, exercise that I do whenever I'm working with a complex feature or a more elaborate feature. And it's just something that I do before I start coding. I spend, I don't know, 30 minutes, an hour. I think it's a really good exercise. It allows me to think about the future of that feature, what I'm going to be building next, and it also serves as documentation. So let's jump into the computer and check that out. All right, cool. So all I have here is a listed chart, and it's just a diagram. And what I like to do is just try to build a flow of the feature, which components I'm going to use, which commands I'm going to use, which events are going to be published, who is the actor, is it a user, is it the system, which boundaries am I crossing. So let's do something here. Let me get rid of this and let me actually go full screen. Okay. Let's just think about, an e-commerce application, and you have the simple feature, which is you want to allow users to purchase items, right? And you might think, okay, an e-commerce application is extremely simple. So you want the user to be able to, search the catalog. So let's write that down. Search the catalog, add items to their cart, check out, or go through checkout or something like that. You probably want to ship some items. You want to decrease the stock. So when you think about a feature in its most simple form, it does look a little bit pretty straightforward, right? And you probably know how to build this. However, most domains are more complex than this, even if you're talking about e-commerce. If you have an e-commerce, maybe you want to deal with, omni-channel. Maybe, let's see if I can write this correctly. Maybe you have multiple delivery centers, right? Maybe you allow the customer to have an item shipped or picked up at the store. If you're shipping something, maybe you have to select from multiple delivery centers. So maybe you also have a marketplace. So the user could be buying items from the actual e-commerce shop and also from sellers. And what I mean with this is if we simplify an idea a lot, it always becomes simple and it's pretty straightforward. If we don't take into account those little nuances that every domain is going to have, every business has, a differentiating factor. And more often than not, your product's not as simple. What I'm trying to say is, although we should not over-engineer our code base and we should try to do the simplest things, we must also take into account the future. So if I'm building an e-commerce and I know that I'll have to deal with these things and also those things, I can write code in such a way that, okay, I don't have to write a bunch of code that I'm not going to use, but I kind of leave it ready to deal with those. And this is just an example. So here's what I like to do. What is the simplest version of that? I'm just going to put some sticky notes here, and we can say that we have a user, right? And we can color those later. And this would be, the checkout feature. I would say you have a user, and that's your actor, and the user is going to go to the checkout page. So let's drop a sticky note here as well, saying checkout page. They're going to place an order. Once they place an order, we're going to chart their payment method. And I'm just going to move things from the top of my head. Charge payment method, or rather pay order, right? That's what we would do. Once an order is paid, we're going to ship items. We're also going to update the inventory because we just purchased something. So update inventory. And that would be the most basic version, if you will. We already have some things here. And when I'm doing this exercise, I would say just diagramming things. And you have proper models for this. You have the C4 model, which we can talk about in other videos, and you have proper ways. You have event storming, that kind of thing. But this is just a very simple exercise that I try to do before building a feature, just to get an idea of how complex it is, which components do I have to touch, and also get some documentation, for free. So we have those little items here. And the first thing that I like to do is to color things, just so I know what is what. And so let's go with, I don't know, we're going to go with light yellow for the user, or this one. You have an actor who's going to this checkout page and they're placing an order. So placing an order, that already sounds like a command to me, like an action. So that's something that I can use within my code base, right? And I'm going to color this red. This already sounds like a command. I know that I can have a class in my application called precisely place order. That makes sense. In many e-commerce applications, you try to charge before creating the order. Sometimes you also want to create the order record and try to charge the payment method later, so that if it fails, the user can retry it later, or you can automatically retry. That's why I have pay order as a separate thing. And pay order also sounds like a command or an event listener. So I'm also going to color this red. Ship items also sounds like a command. And update inventory also sounds like a command. So we have 3 commands that are bound to be executed after an order is placed, right? Now we can just go with arrows. So, simplest thing is you just have that being executed sequentially, right? You're going to pay for an order. You are going to update the inventory. You are going to ship the items, right? Or even better, you would put this inside a box. Let me get rid of those just to kind of showcase this is all done together, right? You have this as a unit. So let's do that. Let me see if I can find some sort of shape that I can add here. Containers right here. Sorry, I don't know how to use this. You don't have to use this one. You can use like Excalidraw or something like that. That's fine. Why can I change this? Okay, so you have an order being paid, and then the inventory is updated, and then that happens. And then maybe you want to send the user an email saying, order paid email. Maybe you want to also have an order shipped. Maybe also an order received email. So we just have a lot of things that we want to do. You see how we're getting a little bit further from the simplest version, the really, really simple version. We're dealing with updating the inventory, shipping the items, paying the order. Now, what if this fails, right? We must do something. So if it fails, we probably want to retry. If it fails for several times, we probably want to email the user, send payment, payment failed email. If we don't have enough inventory, you probably want to either refund the purchase or let the user know somehow that you do not have inventory. So that's also something you'd have to take into account. And the first thing that I'm going to think here is we could maybe publish an event saying not enough items in stock, or, something like that. An event would be weird because it's not something that happened. You need to handle this somehow. So maybe even an exception, not enough items in stock. And then shipment, already have a sticky note here to indicate that something was shipped. So that's our first version, and I think it covers most of it. Like, we can infer that we have items here, so we're placing an order and we have items, so we can even go ahead and say, okay, we have a collection of items, so like, I don't know, cart item collection or something that's being passed here. You probably also have, an order model of some sort, so you have like an order aggregate of sorts. So you have those things, but when you do this, I'm not really super concerned about the internal implementations of those. I'm just trying to understand how the process works. And this is important because as the process gets more complex and you lose the documentation, it gets harder and harder and harder, not only to understand what's happening, but also why is it happening? Why do they think of building it this way? And I think this sort of, for that, it's not perfect documentation. It's not really a proper architectural model, but it's something that allows me to think better when building one of those. So the first thing that I can think here, I can probably, decouple placing an order from this. What I would do in real life probably is place an order, and then I would dispatch an event. So maybe some sort of order placed event, because then if I dispatch this order placed event, I can just return a response to the user pretty quickly. So I can do, order placed, and then I can, for example, redirect to order. All right, so maybe something like that. And I'm just going to put an arrow here. And now once this order placed event is dispatched, is published, now I can try and pay for the order, right? So I can do something like, I'm going to listen to this, and this might fail. So maybe this one is going to dispatch either order paid or payment failed, right? Let's do payment for order failed, something like that. And now I can also listen to those. So if the order was paid, I can have my update inventory function of sorts, command, whatever you want to call it, listen to that, and also have my ship items listen for that. And so let me put this here, and let me put this here. If the payment for the order failed, then I definitely want to send, not the order paid, sorry, that's the wrong one. I want to send that email, so payment failed email, and then probably, I don't know, flag the order somehow, or say that it is bound to be repaid, so that it shows in the UI that you had a failed payment for that. Or, I probably have a command here to handle this, but I don't know what I would do right now. So we have not enough items in stock, which would probably be within ship items. So maybe that's another thing the ship items could throw or dispatch. But maybe you could also dispatch an order shipped. And then within that order shipped, you can update your main order object, add a tracking status, that kind of thing to it. So if you get an order shipped, you also get shipped email. There we go. And the order received would be within the order placed. So we probably want to listen to that somewhere. I'm going to deal with this one later. And then you have order paid. So if the order was paid, you'll likely also want to dispatch that email. As you can see, we have a very different diagram now, and we need to color this. The reason I like to color those is, if you can just take bat an eye and know it's a command or it's an event or anything like that, I think it makes it easier. So if it's a page, let's go with light blue. If it's a command, we're going with red. If it's an event, let's go with, I don't know, green for now, maybe. We have an event, we have a page. I'm also going to go with light blue here, just because it's kind of the same thing. Pay order, update inventory, ship items. This would be an event. So what do we want to go with then? Light green. Let's do light green. Order shipped is also an event. Order paid is also an event. And okay, we already have something. This is really bad. This is a really bad diagram. It allows me to understand how I'm going to build this. And if you look into this, send order paid email. If you look into this, although it's really, really bad, it's not a good diagram by any means. No, this is not. We're not listening to this. We're listening here. Although this is a bad diagram, I can kind of map those to actual classes in my application. So, well, not a checkout page for sure, but I definitely going to have something similar to a place order command, right? And once an order is placed, I could dispatch an order place command, and I could also have a pay order command listening to that event and executing that, which would be an event listener, but it's kind of like a command, right? It's doing the same thing. It's an action. Also, definitely an order paid event. So all of those are mapped almost one-to-one to classes. And that allows me to know in which direction to build my application. Now, this is relatively simple, but then, you get into those things we've said. Okay, you want to ship the items, right? So this is the place where this is something I wouldn't include into this diagram, because now you're talking to a more complex component, right? Which is your shipping component or whatever you want to call it. and have your own abstractions on how to handle that. You might have, like we said, multiple delivery centers, so you could have lots of those, and then you're probably also going to have some sort of abstraction that, let me see if I can make this. You probably have an abstraction to delivery center or something like that. So which items are going to be shipped from where, and this would have to talk to all of those delivery centers, and this starts to get more complex. So I would probably have a separate diagram for those, just because there's so much complexity here, and this complexity grows very, very quickly. So if I can end this payment flow within this order paid event and just have a ship items event on the other module listen to that, and I'll probably not even include this here, I'll wrap this up in the event, maybe just have the listeners, the most important listeners on this diagram, I can start to break down the complexity into different smaller modules with their own documentation, which makes things a little bit simpler. But you can see that even for what seems like a common feature in most e-commerces, which is picking the correct delivery centers or doing, omnichannel, allowing the user to purchase through the phone, through the site, physically, that kind of thing, picking up at a store, picking up some items at a store, just, picking everything and having some delivered. That becomes really, really complex. And if you try to handle all of that in a single place, you're going to have a bad time. Now, if you can deal with one thing, which is just the checkout, just placing an order at one place, and then say, okay, from there, we want to ship the items. And that's encapsulated. You don't really have to care about that. And that's one of the things I like about this. If I know that I'm going to have to do this, and I can figure out a way to decouple this a little bit, I can build my code in such a way that I'm not too worried about how the items are going to be shipped. I just know that it is going to be shipped. That's going to have to happen. I'm not too concerned about how the inventory is going to be updated. I just know that it is going to be updated. And I can just focus on placing an order. And when you focus on just placing an order, this feature becomes much simpler, because now you're not really talking about, doing all of the super complex things all together. You're talking about placing an order within the system and letting your other subsystems know that an order was placed. Now, you don't have to do this with events. You can do it with synchronous commands as well, as long as they're properly encapsulated. And then you're probably going to have to build some diagrams for them as well. Just knowing the actor, which commands you're touching, which events you're going to be dispatching, what are the models or aggregates, whatever you want to call them, that you're touching as well, that makes it much simpler for me to build such a feature. And this exercise also allows you to think about the system you're building a little bit. If you just start coding, which is fun, which is what most of us want to do, which is what I want to do, whenever I'm going to code a new feature or a new program, what I'm going to do is just jump into the code and start coding. That's much more fun than doing diagrams. The problem with that is you haven't really thought that through, and you didn't have the time to put those into paper and try to find for little nuances or some things that would be more complex than you thought. When you do this exercise, sure, you have the benefit of just documenting things, even if it's a little bit, and helping you with that. But it also gives you time to put those ideas into paper and have some ideas. Just get a better picture, a 30,000 foot view, if you will, of what's going on within your system. And you start to notice, okay, that's actually not that simple, because you have to look for this and that and that and that. Shipment is not that simple, because you're going to have multiple providers, you're going to have multiple delivery centers, you're going to have multiple stores to be picked up. It also has a benefit, but I'm not going to go super in depth into this. This is just something that I do for myself. If you're working with a team, surely it's best to have them around for this, especially if you have some domain experts. But this is not event storming. This is not proper domain modeling. This is just something that I do mostly for myself and for developers, just so you can have a general idea of how a feature works. Otherwise, you just have code, and sometimes code can be hard to follow if you're working with the complex systems. And this also becomes a document for you to refer later on to try and understand how things work. Obviously, you can go into much more detail than I did. You can place labels. You can be a little bit more granular. This is just an introduction. But just the act of stopping before writing code and doing this I already think that helps a lot. And this has certainly made my life much easier when dealing with more complex features, or even features that I don't know the full extent of, I'm not too familiar with. It's definitely been a game changer. If you've liked this video, let me know. I don't know if I presented this in the best way possible, but yeah, it's good to do this kinds of different videos, not just code. And let me know if you want to see something related to this later. Like I said, I'm not a super, documentation guy and processes guy, but I know some folks who are really good at this, and maybe I could have them on the channel teaching me a little bit how to do this properly. With that said, I'll see you guys on the next video. So see you later. Bye-bye.